I got an email a couple of days ago from, I guess it's an organisation called Headless.org that I'm on the mailing list for, and it's a relatively small organisation associated with the works of Douglas Harding, who is a mystic, I suppose, who died about 5 years ago or something like that, at a very ripe age. I think he was in his 90s. And he's a very interesting chap, Douglas Harding. I've done a few videos on him, but quite some time ago now, and I haven't really looked at his work for ages. Yeah, I think I might have to go back to that. There's something really interesting about it. I mean, Douglas Harding's work is, his most famous piece of writing is a short book he did in the early 60s called On Having No Head, in which he describes, well, it's a kind of a book about enlightenment as he sees it. So it refers to Zen, and it refers to the whole kind of Western mystical tradition, really, I suppose, in a way, is implied. But he describes it as a primarily a visual experience. He has a kind of not exactly a Pauline conversion, but he has a moment of realization, a moment of epiphany, in which his sense of being separated from the wider world, that kind of falling away of separation that you associate with non-duality and with enlightenment. He has that moment, but he seems to experience it, and it's certainly described in visual terms. He's looking out, I can't remember the details of it, but he's looking out on a landscape, and he sees the trees, he sees the grass, he sees the ground under his feet, he sees his feet, he sees his body, and then he realises he can't see his head, which is a trivial observation in a sense, but he's in this slightly altered state where that inability to see his own head becomes very significant, and effectively the world becomes his head, if you like, or his head and the world becomes synonymous. Because, you know, quite literally in the visual field, as I move up the visual field, the body, I can see my body and I can see my hand, and there's a certain point in which the visual field consists of the world. You know what I mean? So there's a kind of loop from which I'm kind of endlessly implicated within, in which the world and the sense of the world are mutual. It's an interesting perception, really, and I went to a couple of workshops to learn more about his techniques, and I think I've read all of his books now, Douglas Harding's. Fascinating, really fascinating. He drops a lot into mystical language, although he does make reference to what he calls first-person science, or science of the first person. So there's a kind of phenomenological, quasi-scientific rationale behind some of it. But most of the references are, as I say, are mystical. So there's lots of references to Eckhart and to various... Phoebe! Sorry, Phoebe just started chasing a golf ball. Come on, Pup. Lots of references to those kind of things. Where am I going to? Oh yeah, well, what stuck out for me, just revisiting it, actually, having read this email from Headless.org, what jumped out at me was how visual this stuff is. It's pretty unique, I think, in that sense. I know there are precursors, there are other people who've talked about enlightenment as primarily a visual experience, but not many. And not many certainly in the kind of orderly fashion that Douglas Harding talks about it. Most, I don't know about most, but certainly a lot of enlightenment and non-dual experiences are not felt in that sense at all. Come here, Phoebe, that the way. Come on, Pops, good girl.
Morning.
Morning. They're not experienced in that way. They're much more kind of felt. So, getting into a state in which one's separation between self and other, between self and world, that kind of non-dual state, tends to, for me at least, as I understand it, tends to be associated much more with the somatic experience, the body feeling as itself extending into space and filling all of space, and by implication all of space being filled with the self, and the self and space being coterminous, so that kind of an experience. Whereas visuality And here I guess I'm drawing on people like Drew Leder and Merleau-Ponty, that kind of tradition. Kind of posits it's kind of outside of the body. It's that liber and corpus separation that you get in that kind of writing. The separation between a body schema and a body image. I can kind of imagine a body schema, this kind of internal somatic, kinesthetic sense of one's body. I can imagine that seeping out into the environment and leading to this. But usually the opposite of that, the body image, the view of the body from the outside, the corpus, is much more difficult to place within that kind of non-dual position, because it is inherently dual. There is the body, and then there's a place it's kind of imaginatively observed from. But Douglas Harding seems to make the leap. I don't know how he does it quite. I'm going to have to go and think about that a bit more. He does seem to avoid that pitfall, the inevitable non-duality that vision and visuality and the optical presents, is somehow short-circuited in this logic that Douglas Harding's talking about, the logic of having no head, in which the eye that looks out on the world is also the world that looks out. It's kind of weird loop of logic. I don't know quite how that works. Yeah, anyway, I'm going to have to look again at Douglas Harding because of that, I think.